Hey there, everyone. Tonight, we start with a series of new developments stemming from the FBI search of Trump's Florida home last month. And just within the last 24 hours, the Justice Department filed an appeal to temporarily block parts of a judge's order that stopped them from examining the classified documents that were seized in that search. Now, the department asked a federal appeals court in Atlanta to immediately lift the hold and let them resume their work, claiming the delay, quote, impedes the government's efforts to protect the nation's security. Now, the motion was in response to an order that was issued by Trump-appointed District Court Judge Aileen Cannon that was done earlier this week, denying the Justice Department's request to exclude classified documents from a special master's review of the material that was seized. Cannon named Raymond Dearie, a former New York federal judge, as that special master. And the decision from Judge Cannon will likely significantly delay the Department of Justice's probe, which is looking into just exactly how classified material ended up at Trump's residence. Now, according to new reporting from the Washington Post and a call last year with members of Trump's team, National Archives officials were told that none of the material in Trump's possessions was sensitive or classified, and that Trump had only 12 boxes of, quote, news clippings that he stored at his home. Now, since that call, federal officials have recovered 42 boxes of records from Trump's residence, including 15 boxes handed over by his representatives to the archives last January, and an additional 27 boxes retrieved by the FBI last month. And as we now know, some of that material was marked with the highest, and I repeat, the highest classification levels, suggesting those documents contain some of the government's most sensitive and secretive information. Now, so much for news clippings. And this isn't the only legal battle that Team Trump is fighting with the Justice Department. This week, we learned that the DOJ issued dozens of subpoenas related to Trump and his allies and their efforts to overturn the 2020 election. While that number was first reported to be around 40, sources close to Trump told Politico the number of subpoenas issued could actually be between 50 and 75. That's how broad the investigation into election subversion has grown. The aggressive step comes amid new reporting that ex-White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has now complied with a subpoena from the Justice Department in that investigation, making him the highest-ranking Trump official to have cooperated thus far. And as the walls once again begin to close in on Donald Trump, he's going back to his old habits, spreading lies, spreading conspiracies. But even worse, we all know those lies can lead to real violence, and Trump seems to almost be counting on that if things don't go his way. In fact, here's how he responded just this week when asked about a possible indictment.
I think if it happened, I think you'd have problems in this country, the likes of which perhaps we've never seen before. I don't think the people of the United States would stand for it.
What kind of problems, Mr. President?
I think they'd have big problems. Big problems. I just don't think they'd stand for it. They will not sit still and stand for this ultimate of hoaxes.
All right, let's discuss this now with Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu of California. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee, a former Trump impeachment manager, and we should note a former Air Force JAG prosecutor. Congressman, it's great to see you in New York in person. Thank you so much for joining us. You're our first in-person guest on this show in almost a year, so thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you, Eamon. I'm honored to be here and to be your first guest since the pandemic. I
appreciate it. Listen, there's a lot to discuss. I'd like to get your thoughts, first of all, on what happens if this appeal by the Department of Justice is not granted, basically. We have learned from the government's position that it would do serious damage to the government's ability to protect national security and state secrets if, in fact, they are not granted this appeal. What do you make of how this is playing out right now?
I had a security clearance before Congress, and in Congress, I have a top secret security clearance. If I had secret or top secret documents in my home, I would have been arrested and indicted. The lower court's ruling is insane. She is basically suggesting that there's a dispute whether or not these documents are classified. If they are marked secret or top secret, they are classified. And more than that, these are not Donald Trump's documents. The taxpayers funded these documents. The taxpayers own these documents, not the ex-president.
Judge Cannon appointed the special master here in New York. What do you make of the fact that you would just have a judge, although, a very credible and well-respected judge here in New York, look over the contents, but just the idea of having these state secrets that are, as we mentioned, at one point supposed to have had the highest classification within that system, now being reviewed by a judge?
So these secrets are so potentially damaging U.S. national security, they could put Americans' lives at risk, that you have to look at these documents in a special room, and you have to get special permission for some of these documents. Just because I have a top secret clearance, I can't even look at some of these documents. I have to get additional approvals. So to just have additional people keep putting their eyes on these documents is risky to our national security. And I really think that this lower court ruling is crazy for another reason. She is basically suggesting that somehow these documents can be posted on the front pages of the New York Times, that somehow they're declassified. There is no evidence whatsoever that they should be declassified.
Yeah, so let's talk about that disconnect. On one hand, you're saying the documents should be reviewed by a judge, but at the same time, you have the president going on radio or doing interviews and saying that he basically declassified the material. How does one wrap their head around that? If the president is saying they're declassified, but then at the same time, you have a judge saying we need a special master to review the classification of these documents. Which is it?
All right, so let's first of all be clear. Ex-President Donald Trump does not even have a security clearance. And then if he had declassified these documents, this is what would have happened. He would have had to tell someone. He can't declassify them in his own mind. Right. The minute he told someone, they would have told the office that deals with classification documents that, okay, these documents are declassified. And you know what would have happened? The Biden administration on day one would have reclassified them, because It is insane that these documents can appear on the front pages of any newspaper, because you can't just declassify documents for one person. It doesn't work that way. If they're declassified, you get to see it. My cousin gets to see it. Your dentist gets to see it. So that's just crazy all around.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let me ask you about the broader investigation into the attempt to overturn the election. As we were reporting, their subpoenas have gone out. Initially reported around 40, now could be as many as 50 to 75. What do you make of the scope of the investigation as we learn more details about it in terms of what it is the Department of Justice is beginning to piece together with these subpoenas?
In America, there's not one set of laws for ex-President Donald Trump and his associates and another set of laws for everyone else. That's not how it works. In America, the law applies equally. No one is above the law, and that's what the Department of Justice is doing. They're going to apply the law. In addition to these subpoenas, what people should be really scared of if they're a Trump associate is these seizures, because these seizures of phones and these searches of different places had to be approved by a federal judge, and that federal judge would have had to find a probable cause that evidence of a crime was going to be found in that phone.
Do you think that now, as we enter this so-called 60-day period before a midterm election, where the Department of Justice kind of goes into this quiet phase, not to appear influencing, if you will, or being involved in politics ahead of a midterm election, do you think that we are entering into a dangerous period where President Trump is more or less on the ballot, the ex-president is on the ballot because of his ideology, the big lie candidates that are running in these races, and the Department of Justice now has its hands tied a little bit because of a political calculation?
Well, I agree with you that ex-President Donald Trump is on the ballot. So is abortion. And Democrats have been putting people over politics, and we've been working on lowering costs and on safer communities and bigger paychecks. And you've got Republicans who want to criminalize abortion nationwide. So all of this is on the ballot. I do not think that the Department of Justice, however, would indict the ex-president in the next 60 days or so. And by the way, I do agree with Donald Trump that if he were indicted, the country would see problems we've never seen before, because there would be a large, spontaneous amount of people dancing in the streets. And we need people to deal with that. And that's actually what happened when he got kicked out of office. People went and danced in the streets.
Yeah, no, I remember Election Day without a doubt, and certainly when the election was called, the celebrations that were taking place. But speaking of that, what did you make of this sound that we played of Donald Trump more or less warning of violence if he were indicted. Is that something that concerns you? Do you genuinely believe that he has riled up his base enough, him and others, including Lindsey Graham, that if in fact this president is indicted, which many believe he should be, we could potentially see violence in America?
I actually do see we will see dancing in the streets, and we'll see what happened during the prior election when he got kicked out. There was dancing in the streets. Now, in terms of violence, it is always something that could happen because you have Republicans, especially MAGA Republicans, continue to push political violence. I do think that even MAGA Republicans are seeing what's happening with January 6th and the insurrectionists being sent to prison or jail, that they may think twice about doing additional violence.
And really quickly before I go, let me just ask you, how do you feel the Democrats' chances are ahead of the midterms? We've seen some special races in which Democrats surprisingly won. As you said, abortion is on the ballot this year. Has that issue and what it means for Americans changed the dynamics of the midterm?
The overwhelming majority of Americans know that these are deeply personal, private decisions, and that a woman should make that decision in consultation with her doctor, her family, and her God, and that that decision should not be made by Senator Lindsey Graham or other MAGA politicians.
Congressman Ted Lieu, greatly appreciate it. It's great to see you in person. Thank you for making time for us, sir.
Thank you, Eamon.
Take care.